The wind on the high pasture never asked permission, and Caleb Thorne had built his whole life to match that kind of weather. Steady and quiet, unbothered by anyone watching. He woke before the sun because the ranch demanded it, because fences did not mend themselves, because cattle did not care about loneliness, and because silence was easier to carry than hope. The bedroom held that particular stillness that comes just before dawn, when the world is caught between dreaming and waking. Caleb opened his eyes to the familiar ceiling beams, rough-hewn timber that his father had cut and raised 30 years before. The wood grain ran in patterns he could trace in his sleep, each knot and whirl a constellation he had memorized through countless sleepless nights. He sat up slowly, the bed frame creaking beneath him, and his eyes fell on the small rag doll sitting on the dresser across the room. It was crudely made, stuffed with sawdust and scraps of fabric, but the stitching was careful, and the button eyes had been sewn on with evident love. Sarah had made it in the final months before Emma was born, back when hope still filled the house like summer light. Caleb reached out and touched the doll with one calloused finger, feeling the soft, worn fabric. 3 years since Sarah died. 3 years since the midwife had handed him a screaming infant and told him his wife would not wake. 3 years of raising a daughter who had stopped speaking the day she turned 3, as if her voice had simply decided the world was not worth addressing. He stood and dressed in the dark, pulling on work clothes that smelled of hay and sweat, and the particular loneliness of a man who no longer expected company. His boots were cold, the leather stiff from the spring chill that still lingered in the Montana mornings. Beyond the window the hills sat like sleeping animals, and somewhere in the distance a creek moved over stones, its voice the only conversation the land seemed interested in having. Caleb walked to Emma's room and pushed the door open without making a sound. His daughter slept curled on her side, small and impossibly fragile against the expanse of quilts. Her dark hair spread across the pillow, and in sleep her face held a peacefulness that never showed when she was awake. During the day, Emma's eyes carried a watchfulness that broke Caleb's heart, as if she was waiting for something terrible to happen again. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching her breathe. This was his prayer, his church, his communion with whatever forces governed the world, the simple rise and fall of his daughter's chest, the proof that she was alive, that he had kept her alive for another day. Then he turned and walked downstairs, each step a familiar creak in the darkness, and he moved through the kitchen, preparing coffee by memory alone. The stove came to life with the scratch of a match, and the small flame seemed impossibly bright in the pre-dawn gloom. He poured water from the pump into the battered tin pot and set it to boil, then stood at the window looking out at nothing. The yard was still blue with early light. The barn loomed solid and patient, and beyond it the corral fence marched away into shadow. Somewhere out there his cattle were stirring, beginning their slow migration toward the water trough. Somewhere out there the day was preparing to begin, indifferent to whether Caleb was ready for it. He poured the coffee when it was ready, the bitter steam rising into his face like an accusation. He had no sugar to sweeten it, no cream to soften the blow. Just black coffee in a chipped cup, the same cup he had used every morning for 5 years, the same cup Sarah had bought at the general store when they first married, and she still thought domesticity might save them both. Caleb took the coffee onto the porch and stood watching the sunrise begin its slow assault on darkness. The light came reluctant and cold, turning the eastern sky from black to gray to a pale, wounded color that might have been hope if you were generous in your interpretations. He was not generous. He had learned that hope was a luxury men in his position could not afford. A sound from inside made him turn. Emma stood in the doorway, still in her nightgown, her hair tangled from sleep. She held the rag doll against her chest and looked at him with those enormous eyes that seemed to contain more understanding than any 6-year-old should possess. Caleb set down his coffee and knelt to her level. He did not speak. Emma did not speak. They had developed their own language over the years, one built on gestures and silence and the small mercies of just being near each other. She stepped forward and leaned against him, and he wrapped his arms around her small frame and felt the familiar ache in his chest that he suspected was love, mixed with the particular grief of knowing he was failing her. Dr. Harrison had told him months ago that Emma needed more than what he could give. The child needs softness, the doctor had said in his careful way, standing in this very room with his medical bag in hand and his eyes full of pity. She needs a woman's touch. She needs a mother figure. Caleb, your silence is teaching her that the world has nothing to say. Caleb had thanked the doctor and shown him out and never spoken of it again. What was he supposed to do? Advertise for a wife in the territorial papers like she was a mail-order package? Remarry for convenience and doom some woman to this isolated life with a broken man and a silent child? He had tried that once. Sarah had thought she could handle the loneliness. Sarah had been wrong. But now, holding Emma as the sun broke over the ridge and light spilled across the valley like water finding its level, Caleb felt something shift in his chest. Not hope exactly, not even determination. Just a small, quiet voice that whispered perhaps there was another way to do this. Perhaps Emma deserved more than his best attempt at being both mother and father. Perhaps she deserved actual joy instead of just survival. He pulled back and looked into Emma's face. She blinked at him solemnly. Then, using the small gestures they had developed, she touched her stomach and then pointed toward the kitchen. Hungry. He nodded and stood taking her hand, and together they walked inside to begin another day of careful silence. Breakfast was oatmeal cooked over the stove, thick and plain, and enough to fill their stomachs until the evening meal. Emma ate without enthusiasm, pushing the spoon around her bowl, and Caleb watched her with the helpless frustration of a man who did not know how to make anything better. When she finally abandoned the effort, he cleaned the dishes while she went to dress herself. By the time the sun was fully up, they were both ready to face the day's demands. The ranch work called to him with its usual insistence. Fences needed checking, cattle needed moving to fresh grazing hay, needed cutting in the far meadow. All of it necessary, all of it endless, all of it a perfect excuse to avoid thinking about anything that mattered. Caleb loaded Emma into the wagon, her doll clutched in her lap, and they rode into town because supplies would not buy themselves, and Dr. Harrison had left a note asking Caleb to stop by the clinic. Juniper Ridge sat in a valley between mountains, a collection of wooden buildings arranged along a single main street with the optimism of people who believed civilization was just one more railroad spur away. The general store anchored one end, the saloon the other, and between them clustered the necessary infrastructure of frontier life. The blacksmith, the livery, the church with its modest steeple, the doctor's office with its painted sign promising relief from whatever ailed you. Caleb tied the wagon outside the general store and lifted Emma down. She held his hand tightly, her grip the only communication she seemed willing to offer the world. Together they walked up the steps and into the dim interior where Mrs. Holloway presided over her domain of dry goods and gossip with equal authority. The woman looked up from her ledger, and her face softened slightly at the sight of Emma. "Poor thing, Mrs. Holloway," said her voice, carrying the practiced sympathy of someone who enjoyed tragedy as long as it belonged to other people. "How is she doing, Caleb?" "Same as always," Caleb replied. He moved toward the shelves, scanning for the items on his mental list. Flour sugar coffee fabric for making Emma a new dress, since she was growing faster than he could keep up with. Behind him, he could hear Mrs. Holloway murmuring to another customer, voices low and speculative, and he knew without listening that they were discussing him and Emma and the tragedy that defined them both. He was reaching for a bolt of blue calico when he saw her. The woman stood near the window, afternoon light slanting across her in a way that made her seem like she belonged to a softer world. Her black hair was pinned back with a simple comb, but loose strands kept escaping, moving against her cheek every time the breeze from the open door shifted. She wore a plain, dark dress, American in style, but something about the way she held herself suggested other origins. Her hands gripped a small wicker basket, as if the town might steal it from her. Caleb found himself staring before he could stop himself, not because she was beautiful though she was, not because she was a stranger, though Juniper Ridge rarely saw new faces, but because of the expression on her face. Calm but alert, like she was used to being measured by strangers and had learned to give nothing away. Mrs. Holloway's voice drifted over, loud enough to be heard by everyone in the store. "That's the widow from the East," she said to her companion, "the one who bought the Chan place. Too young to be a widow, if you ask me, too pretty to be left alone." The woman's eyes lifted at the sound of her description, meeting Caleb's gaze for just a moment before sliding away. Polite as distance. In that brief connection, Caleb saw something he recognized: the careful way she held herself, the invisible armor she wore against the world's curiosity. He knew that posture. He lived it every day. Emma's hand tightened on his, and Caleb looked down to find his daughter staring at the woman with unusual intensity. Emma rarely looked directly at strangers. She preferred to observe from behind Caleb's legs, using him as a shield against the overwhelming presence of other people. But now she stood slightly forward, her head tilted, studying the woman as if trying to solve a puzzle. The woman seemed to sense Emma's attention. She turned slowly and looked down at the child, and something in her expression softened. Not the exaggerated sweetness adults sometimes used with children, but a genuine, quiet recognition, as if she understood that Emma was different, and that different was not necessarily broken. Then something happened that Caleb would think about for days afterward, turning it over in his mind like a stone he could not quite understand. Emma let go of his hand. She walked forward small steps on the worn wooden floor, and she moved directly toward the woman with purpose. Caleb's first instinct was to reach for her to pull her back, because Emma did not approach strangers. Emma barely tolerated people she had known her entire life. But he found himself frozen, watching as his daughter crossed the space between them. The woman knelt down immediately, making herself small and unthreatening. She did not reach out, she did not speak. She simply waited, hands resting on her knees, as Emma came to stand directly in front of her. For a long moment, nothing happened. The store held its breath. Mrs. Holloway stopped talking. The other customers turned to watch. Even the dust motes in the sunlight seemed to pause their drifting. Then the woman reached into the pocket of her dress and withdrew something small, a piece of candied ginger wrapped in wax paper. She held it out on her palm, offering without insisting, and Emma stared at it with those solemn eyes. "She never goes to strangers," Caleb heard himself say, his voice rough from the shock of it. The woman glanced up at him, and when she spoke, her English carried the careful precision of someone who had learned the language later in life. "Perhaps she knows I understand. Quiet," the woman said simply. Emma reached out and took the candy. Then, in a gesture that made Caleb's throat tighten, his daughter touched the woman's sleeve. Just a small touch, fingers brushing the dark fabric, but it was more contact than Emma had initiated with anyone since Sarah died. The woman smiled. Not broadly, just a small curve of her mouth that held genuine warmth. Then she stood gracefully and stepped back, giving Emma space to retreat if she wanted. Emma did retreat, returning to Caleb's side, but she kept looking back over her shoulder as if she wanted to make sure the woman was still there. Caleb found his voice. "Thank you," he said. "For the candy." The woman inclined her head. "It is nothing, just ginger. Good for many things." There was a moment of awkward silence. "Mrs. Holloway was watching them with naked curiosity, and Caleb could already hear the gossip that would spread through town before sundown. The lonely rancher and the mysterious widow. The silent child and the stranger who somehow reached her. The story practically wrote itself. "I'm Caleb Thorne," he said, because he did not know what else to do. "Lin May," the woman replied. Then after a pause, "People here call me Mrs. Lin." "You're not from Montana," Caleb said, then immediately felt foolish for stating the obvious. Lin May's expression did not change. "No, I am from San Francisco, before that Canton. My husband died last year. I came here to start again." There was something in the way she said it that suggested layers beneath the simple statement. Not lies exactly, but careful omissions. Caleb recognized that too. He was an expert at telling the truth while revealing nothing. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said. "And I for yours," Lin May replied, glancing at Emma. "Mrs. Holloway told me about your wife. It must be difficult." Caleb nodded, not trusting himself to say more. Emma pressed against his leg, and he put his hand on her shoulder, feeling the small bones beneath her dress. They stood like that for another moment, the three of them caught in some strange tableau that Caleb did not understand, until Lin May gave a slight bow and moved toward the counter to pay for her purchases. Caleb finished his shopping in a daze. He bought the flour and sugar and fabric, and he added a small bag of candied ginger to his order, ignoring Mrs. Holloway's knowing look. When he and Emma left the store, he found himself scanning the street, looking for Lin May. but she had already disappeared back toward the small house at the edge of town where old Mr. Chan had lived before retiring to live with his daughter in Helena. The rest of the day passed in its usual rhythms, but something had shifted. Emma was quieter than usual, which was saying something. She kept touching the pocket where she had put the candy, and she kept looking toward a town, as if expecting to see Lin May appear on the horizon. That night, after Emma was asleep, Caleb sat on the porch with his cooling coffee and thought about the way Lin May had knelt to meet his daughter's eyes, the way she had offered kindness without expectation, the way her hands had trembled slightly when she held out the candy as if she was afraid too, but choosing courage anyway. Dr. Harrison's words came back to him. The child needs a woman's touch. She needs a mother figure. Caleb pushed the thought away. It was too soon, too complicated, too dangerous to hope for anything beyond survival. But the thought would not stay pushed. It circled back, like the wind, insistent and patient whispering that sometimes the things you needed most came disguised as strangers in a general store offering ginger candy and understanding to silent children. The days that followed took on a strange new quality, as if the world had tilted slightly on its axis and Caleb was still finding his balance. He told himself he had no reason to go into town more frequently than usual, but somehow he found excuses. The fence wire he needed could only come from Holloway's store. The grain he wanted was only available on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The doctor had mentioned wanting to check on Emma's progress, which meant regular visits to town. The truth which Caleb acknowledged to himself in the dark hours before dawn was that he was looking for Lin May, not actively, not obviously. But his eyes searched the street whenever he drove the wagon in, and his attention sharpened whenever he saw a figure in a dark dress moving between buildings. He saw her 3 times in the first week. Once at the general store, once outside the church where Father Murphy was discussing the upcoming spring social, and once at the edge of town where she was hanging laundry behind her small house. Each time their eyes met, she nodded politely, and each time Caleb felt something in his chest loosen and tighten simultaneously. Emma's reaction was even more pronounced. Every time they went to town, the child became alert in a way Caleb had not seen in years. She would stand in the wagon scanning the street, and when she spotted Lin May, her entire posture would change. Not excited exactly. Emma did not do excitement, but focused, present, as if for those moments she remembered how to be a child interested in the world. On the 4th visit to town, Caleb found a small jar sitting on the seat of his wagon when he returned from the feed store. Honey golden and thick, catching the afternoon light. No note, no explanation. Just honey tied with a piece of rough twine left for him to find. He stood holding the jar thumb resting against the glass and felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. Someone had thought of him. Someone had seen him as more than just the quiet rancher with the silent daughter. Someone had noticed he existed. When he looked up, Lin May was standing across the street outside her laundry shop. She was watching him, hands folded in front of her, and when their eyes met, she did not look away. Just stood there, letting him see her, letting him understand this was not an accident. Caleb crossed the street, the jar still in his hand. Up close he could see the careful way she composed herself, the slight tension in her shoulders that suggested she was prepared for rejection. "You left this," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "I did," Lin May replied. Her accent made the words careful, each syllable placed deliberately. "Why?" She glanced at the sky, at the clouds, moving slow across the valley, then back to him. "Your hands look tired. Honey helps." The sentence was simple, factual, but it landed in Caleb like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples spread out from the impact. No one in town ever looked at him and saw tiredness as something worthy of care. They saw a man doing what men did, carrying burdens without complaint, and they admired his strength while completely missing his exhaustion. "Caleb," he said, offering his name like a treaty. "Lin May," she replied, and she added after a pause that felt like a held breath. "Thank you for not staring like I am a rumor." Caleb swallowed. He had stared. She had noticed. Her honesty was sharp without being cruel. "I'm not good at talk," he admitted. Lin May's mouth curved into the smallest smile. "Then do not talk too much." The wind stirred the loose strands of her hair again, and Caleb had the sudden unwanted thought that he wanted to be the one who tucked them back. The intensity of the desire shocked him. It had been 3 years since he had thought about touching a woman with anything other than abstract grief for what he had lost. Behind them, Mrs. Holloway's voice carried from the general store, speculating loudly about something, and Caleb felt the weight of eyes watching them. Lin May seemed to feel it too, because she stepped back slightly, restoring proper distance. "I should go," she said. Yes, Caleb agreed, though he did not move. She turned and walked back toward her shop, and Caleb stood in the street, holding the honey and feeling like something significant had just occurred, though he could not name exactly what. That night, he sat Emma down at the kitchen table and opened the jar. The honey was dark and rich, probably wildflower from the looks of it, and when he spread it on bread for their dinner, Emma ate with more appetite than he had seen in months. They finished the entire jar within 3 days, and Caleb found himself mourning its loss more than seemed reasonable for a simple gift. 2 weeks passed in this careful dance. Caleb would see Lin May in town. They would exchange brief words, never more than a few sentences. She would ask about Emma. He would ask about her laundry business. The conversations were mundane on the surface, but underneath ran currents of something neither of them was ready to name. Then came the afternoon when Lin May's wagon wheel cracked a mile from his ranch. Caleb was mending fence when he saw her walking up the long drive, the broken spoke over her shoulder, her posture straight despite the obvious weight. She was refusing to look helpless, even though she clearly needed help, and the sight of her determination made something warm spread through his chest. He met her at the gate already, assessing the damage to the wheel. "I need a new wheel," Lin May said without preamble. "Then softer, or a way to fix this." Caleb nodded and led her to the barn. The afternoon light came through gaps in the boards, making stripes across the dust and hay. He knelt beside the wheel and examined it with the practiced eye of a man who had been fixing things his entire life. The wood was split, but not beyond repair. 20 minutes of careful work, and it would get her home. An hour, and it would be properly sound. Lin May stood nearby, watching him work. Emma appeared in the doorway, drawn by the presence of a visitor, and she came to stand beside Lin May with the easy comfort of a child who had decided this person was safe. Caleb worked in silence, his hands moving through familiar motions, measuring, cutting, fitting. The wood shavings fell around his boots like snow. The barn smelled of hay and leather, and the particular peace that came from work that had clear purpose and visible results. "You do not curse," Lin May observed. Caleb shrugged. "Doesn't fix it." "Some men curse because they are afraid," she said quietly. The words hit somewhere deep, somewhere Caleb did not want to examine. He kept working, not looking up, not acknowledging how accurately she had just described half the men he knew. Men who yelled at their horses and their children and their wives because they were terrified of their own inadequacy and had never learned another way to express it. When he finished, he stood and handed her the wheel, careful not to touch her hands. "It'll get you home," he said. Lin May looked at his hands, dusty and scratched from the work, then lifted her eyes to his face. "You are always alone out here." It was not a question, just an observation, but it made Caleb's throat tighten anyway. "Ranch keeps me busy," he replied, and the answer sounded like a lie even to him. Lin May nodded like she understood exactly what men did with loneliness when they were taught not to name it. She stepped closer just enough to set a small cloth bundle on the workbench. "For you." Caleb opened it carefully, warm bread still smelling faintly of smoke and sweetness. "Lin May," he started, but she lifted a hand, stopping him gently. "I do not give gifts to trap you," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I give gifts because I know what it is to eat alone." The barn seemed to hold its breath. Even the horses shifted softly, as if they sensed the gravity in those plain words. Emma stood watching them both with her solemn eyes, and Caleb wondered what his daughter understood about this moment that he was still struggling to comprehend. He nodded once, throat too tight for words, and Lin May turned to leave with her repaired wheel. Caleb watched her go, watched the way the late afternoon sun caught in her hair, and he thought about eating alone and tiredness and honey and small kindnesses that somehow felt larger than the sum of their parts. The weeks moved forward. Spring deepened into something approaching summer. The ranch work intensified with the changing season, but Caleb found himself making time for trips to town that were not strictly necessary. Lin May was always there, always polite, always maintaining careful distance. But the distance was shrinking. Conversations lasted longer. Silences became comfortable rather than awkward. Emma blossomed under Lin May's attention. She still did not speak, but she began using more gestures. She would draw pictures and show them to Lin May when they met in town. Once she picked wildflowers and presented them to Lin May with the solemnity of a formal gift, and Lin May had accepted them with equal gravity, pressing them between the pages of a book she carried. Dr. Harrison noticed the change. "I don't know what you're doing," he told Caleb one afternoon at the clinic, "but keep doing it. Emma is more present than I've seen her in 2 years." Caleb did not know how to explain that he was not doing anything. He was just allowing Lin May to exist in their orbit, and somehow that was enough. Somehow this quiet woman who offered ginger candy and honey and bread was reaching parts of Emma that Caleb had thought were lost forever. Then came the announcement about the spring dance. Juniper Ridge held the event every year in the community hall, half celebration and half excuse for people to watch who spoke to whom and how closely they stood together. Caleb had not attended since Sarah died. The thought of standing in a room full of couples while he represented visible loss had always seemed like a special kind of torture. But Hank Dwyer caught him outside the feed store one morning, breath smelling of last night's whiskey, and said, "If you don't show your face, folks will decide you're dead. Besides, that widow will be there." I heard Mrs. Holloway practically ordering her to come. Caleb felt something twist in his stomach. The idea of Lin May alone in that room being evaluated by every gossip in town made him angry in a way he could not quite articulate. "Fine," he heard himself say. "I'll come." Hank grinned. "Bring Emma. Let people see the girl's still alive, too." The night of the dance arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of evening that smelled like promise and growing things. Caleb dressed in his cleanest shirt and tried to tame his hair, feeling foolish for caring how he looked. Emma wore a new dress sewn from the fabric he had bought months ago, and she clutched her rag doll like a talisman against the ordeal ahead. They arrived late, standing in the doorway while Caleb's eyes adjusted to the lantern light and the press of bodies. The hall smelled of lamp oil and dust and cheap whiskey masked by perfume. A fiddle played bright, restless music in the corner, and laughter bounced off the walls. Caleb's eyes found Lin May almost immediately because his body had started doing that without permission. She stood near the edge of the crowd, wearing a simple pale dress that made her look like moonlight against the darker room. Her hands were folded in front of her, and Caleb recognized the posture. She was holding herself together by force of will. People watched her the way they might watch a new kind of weather, beautiful and unsettling. The men looked with appreciation they tried to hide. The women looked with curiosity mixed with judgment. And Lin May stood under all that attention with her chin lifted and her expression carefully neutral. Caleb felt heat rise in his chest, not anger exactly, but something protective that frightened him with its intensity. Emma tugged at his hand, and he looked down to find his daughter pointing at Lin May. He nodded, and they moved through the crowd, navigating between conversations and dancers until they stood near enough that Lin May turned and saw them. Her face transformed. The careful neutrality fell away and something genuine appeared in its place. Relief, warmth, the unguarded pleasure of seeing allies in hostile territory. "Mr. Thorne," she said. "Emma." Emma let go of Caleb's hand and moved directly to Lin May's side, pressing against her skirts like she belonged there. Lin May placed her hand gently on Emma's head, and Caleb felt his chest constrict at the easy affection between them. "You came," Lin May said to him. Seemed like the thing to do. Before either of them could say more, Hank appeared at Caleb's shoulder, already drunk and already loud. "There she is," Hank boomed, and Caleb heard the inevitable disaster approaching like distant thunder. Mrs. Lynn Hank continued swaying slightly. "Let me introduce you properly to Caleb Thorne, the loneliest rancher in 3 counties. Caleb felt his face burn. "We've met, Hank." But Hank was not finished. He had the momentum of a man who thought he was being helpful and funny, and there was no stopping him once he got started. "I got a question for you, Mrs. Lynn," Hank said, his voice carrying across nearby conversations. "You ever think of marrying a man who's got land and no sense?" The nearby chatter softened, hungry for spectacle. Caleb felt a tension gathering around them like a physical weight. Hank Caleb warned, but his voice came out strangled. "What?" Hank laughed. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Pretty widow, lonely rancher. Makes sense, don't it?" The crowd tittered with cruel amusement, and Caleb saw Lin May's expression tighten. She was being turned into entertainment made into a joke for people who did not know or care what she had endured to get here. Caleb stepped forward, intending to pull Hank back to end this before it became worse. But the words came out wrong. They always did when a man was trying to deflect pain with humor, trying to protect someone by making himself the target instead. He looked at Lin May, meaning to offer an apology disguised as a grin, and he said, "Well, Mrs. Lin, if you need a husband to quiet this town's gossip, you can marry me." The sentence landed like a dropped plate, sharp and sudden. The room fell into a silence so complete it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. The fiddle player actually stopped mid-note. Caleb's heart slammed once hard because he realized what he had done, how his attempt to deflect Hank's mockery had turned private ache into public stakes, how he had just proposed marriage as a joke in front of half the town, and everyone was watching to see how the widow would respond. Lin May stared at him. Her eyes were wide, dark, and fathomless in the lantern light. For a moment he saw fear there and something else, something that looked like she was balancing on the edge of a decision that would change everything. Then her expression shifted. Something settled in her face, a kind of quiet determination. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear, cutting through the silence like clean water through stone. "I thought you'd never ask, rancher." The laughter died completely. Hank's grin collapsed. Mrs. Holloway's hand flew to her mouth. The room seemed to tilt beneath Caleb's feet because Lin May's answer did not sound like a joke. It sounded like acceptance, like she had been waiting for someone to choose her without treating her like a bargain or a rumor or a piece of gossip. Caleb opened his mouth, but no sound came. The only thing he could hear was his own pulse and the distant, uncertain scrape of the fiddle bow as the musician tried to decide if he should start playing again. Then Emma's small voice cut through everything. "Mama." The word was so unexpected, so impossible that for a moment no one moved. Emma had not spoken in 3 years, not a word, not a sound beyond the occasional whimper of nightmares. But now she stood between Caleb and Lin May, her small face turned toward the dark corner of the hall, and she said it again. Mama Caleb followed his daughter's gaze, his blood turning cold. There, just inside the doorway, stood a woman he had never seen before. She was Chinese, perhaps 45 years old, dressed in expensive clothing that spoke of city wealth. Her face was hard and cold, and she was looking directly at Lin May with an expression that made Caleb's protective instincts roar to life. The woman stepped forward, and she spoke in a language Caleb did not understand, but he saw Lin May's face drain of all color, saw her whole body go rigid with fear, saw her take an involuntary step backward as if she had just seen a ghost. The woman switched to English, her accent heavy but her words perfectly clear. She looked around the room, making sure everyone could hear, and then she delivered the line that would shatter the fragile possibility Caleb had just begun to imagine. "Lin May," the woman said coldly, "your husband is looking for you." The room erupted in whispers. Caleb stood frozen, not understanding his mind, trying to process the words. Husband. Lin May had said she was a widow. She had said her husband died. But this woman was saying something completely different, and the truth was written in Lin May's terrified face. Lin May was not a widow. Lin May was a runaway wife. And whoever her husband was, he had found her. The music had stopped completely now. People were staring openly, no longer pretending politeness. Emma pressed against Caleb's leg, her brief moment of speech already retreating back into silence. And Lin May stood alone in the center of the room, exposed and vulnerable, while the careful life she had built in Juniper Ridge crumbled around her. Caleb looked at her, and she looked back, and in her eyes he saw desperation and apology and a plea for understanding she did not have the right to ask for. But before he could speak, before he could move, before he could decide what any of this meant, the woman in expensive clothes took another step forward. "Mr. Wong will be here in 3 days, she said, still looking at Lin May. He has been very patient looking for you. But his patience has limits. Then she turned and walked out of the hall, leaving chaos in her wake. The room exploded into conversation. Questions flew at Caleb and Lin May from all directions. Hank was trying to apologize. Mrs. Holloway was demanding explanations. Dr. Harrison was pushing through the crowd, concern etched on his face. But Caleb only saw Lin May. She stood perfectly still, tears streaming down her face, and she looked at him like he was the only solid thing left in a world that had just betrayed her completely. He took a step toward her, she took a step back, and the distance between them felt like all the space in the world. The night air hit Caleb like cold water when he pushed through the community hall doors. Lin May was already 20 yards ahead, running toward the darkness beyond the main street, her pale dress ghostly in the moonlight. Behind him, the hall buzzed with excited voices, speculation spreading like wildfire through dry grass, but Caleb heard none of it. He only heard his boots against the wooden boards, his breath coming hard, and the single thought pounding through his head like a drumbeat. Go after her, go after her, go after her. He caught up to her near the livery stable where the shadows pooled thick and the smell of horses hung heavy in the air. She had stopped running, but stood with her back to him, shoulders heaving, hands pressed against the weathered boards of the stable wall, as if she needed something solid to keep her upright. Lin May, Caleb said. She flinched at her name but did not turn. The sound of footsteps behind them made Caleb spin around. The woman from the hall approached with measured steps, her expensive dress whispering against the dust. Up close, Caleb could see she was older than he had first thought. Lines etched deep around her mouth and eyes, but her posture radiated authority and something darker, something that looked like satisfaction at cornering prey. "Mr. Thorne," the woman said, her English precise despite the accent. "My name is Mrs. Chen. I have come from San Francisco on behalf of Mr. Wang Yaoting, a respected merchant of that city. The woman you know as Mrs. Lin is his legal wife. She has been missing for 8 months. Her family is very concerned." Caleb felt Lin May's fear like a physical presence in the dark. He positioned himself between the two women without thinking about it, his body making decisions his mind had not yet processed. "That's so," he said, voice flat. Mrs. Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Yes, I have papers to prove the marriage, Mr. Wang is a man of considerable influence. He has been searching for his wife with great dedication. He will be very relieved to know she has been found." Lin May made a small sound behind him, something caught between a gasp and a sob. Caleb did not turn to look at her. He kept his eyes on Mrs. Chen, reading the calculation there, the way she was measuring him, and finding him insignificant. "What does he want?" Caleb asked. "What any husband wants." His wife returned to him. "And if she doesn't want to go?" Mrs. Chen's expression hardened. "That is not how marriage works, Mr. Thorne. Surely even in this frontier town you understand that a wife belongs to her husband. The law is very clear on this matter." "Is it?" Caleb said quietly. "Because I just asked this woman to marry me, and she said yes, in front of half the town." Mrs. Chen laughed a sharp, brittle sound. "A joke proposal, made to a woman already married that has no legal standing whatsoever." "Maybe not," Caleb agreed, "but it shows intent, and around here that matters." The two of them stood facing each other in the moonlight, while Lin May remained silent behind Caleb's broad back. The moment stretched out taut as wire until finally Mrs. Chen reached into her bag and withdrew a folded paper. She held it out. $500, she said, for information leading to her return. Mr. Wang is a generous man to those who help him, and he can be equally generous in showing his displeasure to those who obstruct him. Caleb took the paper but did not look at it. He felt its weight in his hand, felt the temptation it represented. $500 was more money than he had seen in years. It could fix the ranch buy cattle, secure Emma's future. All he had to do was step aside and let this woman take Lin May back to a husband she had run from. He tore the paper in half. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her composed facade. "Mr. Thorne, you are making a very serious mistake." "I don't know any," Lin May, Caleb said, each word deliberate and heavy as stone. "The woman working at my ranch is Mrs. Thorne, my fiancée, and she's not going anywhere." Mrs. Chen's face went cold. "Mr. Wong will come for her himself. He will bring legal authority. He will bring men. You cannot protect her by pretending she is yours." "Then I'll stop pretending," Caleb said. Mrs. Chen held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. But when Mr. Wong arrives, do not say you were not warned. He does not accept defiance gracefully." She turned and walked back toward the main street, her footsteps measured and confident. Caleb watched until she disappeared around the corner, then finally turned to face Lin Mei. She had slid down the stable wall and sat crumpled in the dust, her pale dress pooled around her like spilled milk. Her face was buried in her hands and her shoulders shook with silent crying. Caleb stood looking down at her, his heart hammering, his mind racing through implications he was only beginning to understand. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. "Are you married?" Lin Mei's hands slowly lowered from her face. In the moonlight, her tears looked like silver tracks on dark stone. "Yes," she whispered. The single word felt like a fist to Caleb's gut, but he forced himself to stay still, to listen. "Why did you lie?" Lin Mei looked up at him, and in her eyes Caleb saw layers of pain he could not begin to fathom. "I did not lie," she said. "I told people I was a widow. I wanted to be a widow. I prayed every night for 8 months that he would die and make it true." "Tell me," Caleb said. "All of it." Lin Mei drew a shaking breath. The story came out in fragments, each piece sharp and cutting. Her father had sold her when she was 19 to settle gambling debts. Wang Yaoting was 40 years old, wealthy, respectable by San Francisco standards. He had a wife in China and 2 concubines in California. Lin Mei became concubine number 3. She spoke of 9 years locked in rooms that smelled of incense and fear. 9 years of being property, of being decorative and silent and available. 9 years of bruises hidden under silk, of pregnancies beaten out of her body before they could take root, of learning that the law did not care what happened to Chinese women behind closed doors. "He never loved me," Lin Mei said, her voice barely audible. "I was a possession, something to show his wealth and power. When I made him angry, he would lock me in a room for days. No food, no water, just darkness and silence until I learned my place." Caleb felt rage building in his chest, hot and righteous and useless. "How did you escape a missionary woman?" Lin Mei said. "Mrs. Mary Whitmore. She ran a school for Chinese girls. I met her when Wong allowed me to go to market with guards. I begged her for help. She gave me new papers, new clothes, money for the train. She told me to run as far as I could and never look back." "So you came here." "I came here," Lin Mei confirmed. "I thought Montana was far enough. I thought he would give up. I thought I could just disappear and start again." And Mrs. Chen Lin Mei's face crumpled again. "I do not know her. But Wong has many people who owe him favors. Many people who fear him. She must be one of them." Caleb crouched down until he was at eye level with her. His knees protested the position, but he ignored the discomfort. "Lin Mei," he said carefully, "if I help you, if I stand against this man, I need to know. Is there anything else you haven't told me?" She met his eyes, and he saw the war happening behind them, the desperate desire to be honest, fighting against the trained instinct to hide, to protect herself by revealing nothing. Finally, she shook her head. "No, that is everything. I am a runaway wife with false papers. I am illegal in the eyes of the law. And when Wong comes, he will take me back or see me arrested. Those are the only choices." "No," Caleb said. "There's always another choice." He stood and held out his hand. Lin Mei stared at it for a long moment, then placed her small, cold fingers in his calloused palm. He pulled her to her feet, and she swayed unsteady, and without thinking, Caleb caught her elbow to steady her. They stood like that, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of soap and fear on her skin, close enough to see the way her pulse fluttered in her throat, close enough that stepping forward would mean crossing a line from which there was no return. "What choice?" Lin Mei whispered. "We'll figure it out," Caleb said. "But right now we need to get you somewhere safe." He wanted to take her back to the ranch, but Emma was still at the community hall with Dr. Harrison, and leaving her there was unthinkable. Instead, he led Lin Mei to the small office behind the general store where Mrs. Holloway kept her accounts. The door was unlocked, as most doors in Juniper Ridge were trusting in community rather than locks. Inside, surrounded by ledgers and the smell of dry goods, Caleb lit a lamp and turned to face Lin May properly. She stood with her arms wrapped around herself, still shaking, looking younger and more lost than he had ever seen her. "I brought danger to you," she said. "I brought danger to Emma. I should leave tonight." "Where would you go?" "Anywhere. Nowhere. It does not matter." "It matters to me," Caleb said, and the words came out more fierce than he intended. "You matter to Emma. She spoke tonight. First words in 3 years, and she spoke because you were there." Lin May's eyes filled with fresh tears. "She said, Mama." "She said, Mama," Caleb confirmed. "Because you make her feel safe enough to talk. Because somehow in a few weeks you did what I couldn't do in 3 years. So don't you dare tell me it doesn't matter if you disappear." The tears spilled over, and Lin May pressed her hands to her face. "I do not know how to fix this," she said through her fingers. "Neither do I," Caleb admitted. "But we'll figure it out together." He meant it as reassurance, but heard how it sounded. Together. Like they were already a unit, already bound by something more than circumstance. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Before either could speak again, the door opened, and Dr. Harrison appeared with Emma in his arms. The child was asleep, head resting on the doctor's shoulder, one hand still clutching her rag doll. "Thought I'd find you here," Dr. Harrison said quietly. "Town's in an uproar. Thought it best to get the little one away from all that talk." Caleb took Emma from him gratefully. His daughter stirred but did not wake, and he held her close, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing against his chest. Doc Caleb said, "I need your help." Dr. Harrison looked between Caleb and Lin May, his wise old eyes missing nothing. "Tell me what you need." The next morning arrived too quickly, ray light seeping through windows like water through a sieve. Caleb had slept badly on the settee in his own sitting room, having given his bed to Lin May and Emma. Every sound jerked him awake, heart pounding, expecting to see Wong and his men appearing out of the darkness. But morning came quietly, the ranch waking to birdsong and the distant lowing of cattle. Caleb stood and stretched the kinks from his back, then walked to the kitchen to start coffee. He found Lin May already there, dressed and packing her few belongings into a worn carpet bag. She moved efficiently, mechanically, and Caleb understood what he was seeing. She was preparing to run again, preparing to disappear before she caused more damage. "Where will you go?" he asked from the doorway. Lin May startled, nearly dropping the bag. "Anywhere he cannot find me. That's not a plan." "That's just more running. What else can I do?" Lin May's voice rose slightly, tension cracking through her careful composure. "Stay and bring the law down on you. Stay and watch Wong destroy everything you have built. I will not do that to you and Emma. What if I don't want you to go?" The question stopped her. She turned slowly, the bag clutched to her chest like a shield. "You do not understand what you are saying. Wong is powerful. He has connections all through the territories. He will use the law against you. He will make you suffer for helping me. Then we'll deal with it," Caleb said. "How?" Lin May demanded. "How will you deal with legal papers that say I am his wife? How will you deal with marshals who will enforce those papers?" "You cannot fight the law, Caleb. Maybe not alone." Lin May shook her head, frustration and fear warring in her expression. "You are a good man, but you cannot save me from this. No one can." The sound of small footsteps on the stairs interrupted them. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair tangled from sleep, still in her nightgown. She looked at Lin May's carpet bag, then at Lin May's face, and something in the child's expression crumpled. Emma crossed the kitchen in 3 running steps and wrapped her arms around Lin May's waist, pressing her face against the carpet bag. The gesture was desperate, clinging, and Lin May dropped the bag to the floor so she could hold Emma properly. Caleb watched his daughter, watched the way Emma's small shoulders shook with silent crying, and felt something break open in his chest. Emma had not cried since Sarah's funeral. She had not shown this kind of raw emotion in 3 years. But now she clung to Lin May like she was drowning, and Lin May was the only thing keeping her afloat. Lin May sank to her knees, bringing herself to Emma's level. "Sweetling," she whispered, and Caleb heard tears in her voice. "I must go." Emma pulled back and looked at Lin May's face. Then, in a voice barely louder than breathing, she said, "Stay." One word, whispered. But it shattered what remained of Lin May's composure. She pulled Emma close again and buried her face in the child's hair, her whole body shaking with sobs she had clearly been holding back for hours. Caleb stood watching them, these two people who had somehow become essential to his life, and he made a decision. Not a careful decision, not a thought-through decision, but a decision nonetheless. He crossed the kitchen and knelt beside them, wrapping his arms around both Lin May and Emma. They formed a small, tight circle on the kitchen floor, holding each other, while morning light strengthened outside and the coffee pot began to whistle on the stove. "We'll fight this," Caleb said into Lin May's hair. "Whatever it takes, we'll fight it together." Lin May pulled back enough to look at him, her face wet with tears. Why, she asked. "Why would you risk everything for me?" Caleb looked at Emma, then back at Lin May. "Because my daughter deserves a mother who makes her feel safe enough to speak. Because you brought life back into this house. Because I'm tired of being alone, and I think you are too." The words were clumsy, insufficient, but they were true. Lin May searched his face as if looking for signs of doubt or deception. Finding none, she nodded slowly. "I am afraid," she admitted. "So am I," Caleb said. "But we'll be afraid together." They stayed like that for another moment, the three of them knotted together on the kitchen floor before the practical demands of the day forced them to separate. Caleb made breakfast while Lin May helped Emma dress. They ate in quiet companionship, not speaking much, but the silence felt different now, less lonely, more like the comfortable quiet of people who had decided to stand together. After breakfast, Caleb hitched the wagon and they drove into town. He had sent word to Dr. Harrison the night before, and the doctor was waiting at his office with Father Murphy, and surprisingly, Hank Dwyer, looking surprisingly sober. "We need to talk about options, Doctor," Harrison said once they were all gathered in his examination room. "This Mr. Wong will arrive with legal papers. We need to understand what we're facing." Father Murphy cleared his throat. "I have some experience with territorial law," he said. "If Mrs. Lin's marriage was contracted in California, it is valid throughout the territories, unless we can prove coercion or fraud." "Can we?" Caleb asked, looking at Lin May. She shook her head. "I signed papers. I did not understand what they said, but I signed them. My father signed them. There were witnesses. It was legal." "What about proof of abuse?" Dr. Harrison asked gently. Lin May flinched. "I have scars, but they are old, and no one will believe they came from Wong. He is very careful, very respected." The room fell into discouraged silence. Hank shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "There has to be something we can do," he said. "Can't just let the bastard take her. The law is the law," Father Murphy said sadly. "Then we changed the situation," a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. Mrs. Chen stood there, but something about her was different. Her expensive clothes looked slept in, and her face showed signs of tears and sleeplessness. She looked smaller somehow, less certain. "Mrs. Chen," Caleb said, standing. "What are you doing here?" "I came to tell the truth," Mrs. Chen said. Her English was still accented, but less formal now, as if pretense had been stripped away. "My name is Chen Mei Ling. I am Lin May's mother." The room erupted in exclamations. Lin May stood abruptly, her face draining of color. "You," she breathed, "you sold me." Mrs. Chen flinched but did not look away. "Yes, I sold you to pay my debts. I told myself it was for the best, that you would have a rich husband, a good life. I believed the lies because believing was easier than admitting what I had done." "Then why are you here?" Lin May demanded, her voice shaking with rage and grief. "Why did you come to drag me back to him?" Mrs. Chen's face crumpled. "Wong offered $1,000, a fortune. I thought I could take the money and finally escape my own debts. But last night I saw you. I saw how you looked at this man and his daughter. I saw the fear in your eyes when I said Wong's name. And I remembered how you looked on your wedding day. 16 years old and terrified." 19, Lin May corrected bitterly. "I was 19. You were a child," Mrs. Chen said. "And I sold you like cattle. I have spent 8 months helping Wong search for you, telling myself I was doing the right thing, but I was just trying to profit from you one more time." She reached into her bag and pulled out a bundle of papers. "These are Wong's documents. Marriage certificates, transfer papers, everything he needs to claim you legally. I was supposed to give them to the territorial marshal when he arrives with Wong. And now Caleb asked carefully. Mrs. Chen walked to the stove and dropped the papers into the fire. Now I burn them. Without these, Wong has no proof. His lawyers in San Francisco have copies, but it will take weeks for him to get new ones. Maybe months. The papers caught and flared, edges curling black. Everyone watched in stunned silence as legal bondage transformed into ash. Why, Lin Mei whispered. Because you are my daughter, Mrs. Chen said simply. And I have been a terrible mother. I cannot undo what I did. But perhaps I can give you time to escape again, or to fight. She turned to Caleb. Mr. Wong will still come. He will still claim her. But without papers, he has no legal authority. At least, not immediately. You have perhaps a week, maybe two, before he can get new documents. What happens to you? Dr. Harrison asked. When Wong finds out what you did, Mrs. Chen smiled sadly. I will disappear. I am good at that. And perhaps this time I will disappear for the right reasons. She looked at Lin Mei one last time. I know you cannot forgive me. I do not ask for forgiveness. But know that I am sorry. Know that I wish I had been the mother you deserved. Lin Mei stood, frozen emotions flickering across her face, too quickly to name. Finally, she gave a single sharp nod. Goodbye, Mother. Mrs. Chen nodded back. Then she turned and walked out of the office, out of the town, out of their lives. In the silence that followed, Father Murphy spoke softly. That gives us time. But time alone will not solve this. Wong will return with new papers. Unless she's not Lin Mei anymore, Hank said. Everyone looked at him. What? Hank shrugged. If she marries Caleb for real, takes his name, becomes Mrs. Thorne. Legally, then, Wong's looking for a woman who doesn't exist anymore. Can we do that? Caleb asked Father Murphy. Can we marry fast enough? The priest considered. I can perform the ceremony, but there will be questions. People will say it's fraud, a way to escape legal marriage. Let them say it, Caleb said. He looked at Lin Mei. If you're willing. Lin Mei stared at him, and Caleb saw the calculations happening behind her eyes. The weighing of risks and benefits. The question of whether she could trust him, whether this was just another form of being owned. Then Emma, who had been silent throughout, tugged on Lin Mei's sleeve. When Lin Mei looked down, Emma signed something with her hands, a gesture they had developed together that meant stay. Lin Mei's eyes filled with tears. She looked back at Caleb. If I say yes, she said slowly, it must be real, not just papers. I will not go from one cage to another. It will be real, Caleb promised, or as real as we can make it. Then yes, Lin Mei said. Yes, I will marry you. Father Murphy nodded gravely. Then we do it tonight, quietly, with only those in this room as witnesses. The less fanfare, the better. That night, long after the sun had set and the ranch had fallen into darkness, a small group gathered in the church, just Father Murphy, Dr. Harrison, Hank, and Emma as witnesses. Caleb wore his cleanest shirt. Lin Mei wore the pale dress from the dance, hastily cleaned of dust. They stood before the altar in flickering lamplight that made their shadows dance on stone walls. Emma stood between them, holding both their hands, and Father Murphy opened his prayer book. But before the priest could begin the formal ceremony, Caleb held up his hand. Wait, he said. If we're doing this, I want to do it right. He turned to Lin Mei and took both her hands in his. The soft glow caught the nervous flutter of her pulse in her throat, the way her fingers trembled in his grasp. I'm not good with words, Caleb said, and I don't know how to make pretty speeches. But I need you to know why I'm doing this. He paused, gathering courage. I take you not because of the law, not to save you from Wong, though I want to do that. I take you because Emma smiles when you're near, and she hasn't smiled in 3 years. I take you because my ranch feels like a home when you're in it, instead of just a place I work. I take you because you saw me tired and brought me honey, because you fixed what was broken without making me feel weak, because I don't want to go back to the quiet that was just loneliness pretending to be peace. Lin Mei's tears spilled over, catching light as they fell. When she spoke, her voice was steady despite the crying. I take you, she said, not because I need protection, though you have protected me without asking anything in return. Not because I need papers, though I need those too. I take you because you gave me a place where I could breathe, because you saw me afraid and did not run, Because your daughter taught me I could be loved without being owned. Because you made me believe I deserved to be chosen." She reached up and touched his face fingers gentle against his rough jaw. "I choose you," she whispered. "I choose this life. I choose to stop running." Caleb leaned down and kissed her. Not the chaste kiss of ceremony, but something deeper, a sealing of intention, mouths moving against each other with the desperate relief of people who had found harbor after long storm. When they pulled apart, Father Murphy was smiling. "Well," he said, "I suppose that makes the formal vows somewhat redundant." "Say them anyway," Caleb said, not taking his eyes from Lin May. "I want it done proper." So Father Murphy spoke the ancient words, and they repeated them, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, the small gathering erupted into quiet congratulations. Dr. Harrison produced a bottle of whiskey, and they toasted the union. Hank clapped Caleb on the back and told Lin May she was getting a decent man, even if he was stubborn as a mule. Emma stood watching it all, and when Lin May knelt to her level, the child whispered, "Mama." "Yes, sweetling," Lin May said. "I am your mama now." They left the church as a family, stepping out into spring darkness that smelled of rain approaching. Caleb helped Lin May into the wagon, then lifted Emma up beside her. The three of them sat close together on the bench, and as Caleb drove them home through the night, he felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. But hope was a fragile thing, and the world had a way of testing it. 2 days later, Wang Yao Ting arrived in Juniper Ridge. He came in a hired carriage with 3 men who looked more like guards than servants. He wore expensive Eastern clothes and carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. He took rooms at the boarding house and immediately sent word to the territorial marshal that he required assistance in a legal matter. Word spread through town like contagion. The Chinese merchant whose wife had run away. The legal husband who had come to claim what was his. People chose sides. Some sided with Wang, seeing in him respectability and legal right. Others sided with Caleb, valuing frontier justice over distant law. The confrontation came on the 3rd day. Caleb was in the corral working a young horse when he saw the carriage approaching. He felt his whole body tense, every instinct screaming danger. Inside the house, Lin May was teaching Emma to braid hair, both of them peaceful and unaware. The carriage stopped outside his gate. Wang descended with elegant precision, brushing dust from his coat. His 3 men remained by the vehicle, but their presence was clear threat. Mr. Thorne, Wang said in perfect unaccented English, "I believe you are sheltering my wife." Caleb walked to the fence, putting himself between Wang and the house. "I'm sheltering my wife," Wang smiled. It did not reach his eyes. A charming fiction, but fiction nonetheless. "Lin May is legally married to me. I have papers." "Had papers," Caleb corrected. "I heard they got burned." Wang's smile froze. Temporary setback. "My lawyers are preparing new documentation as we speak. When they arrive, the territorial marshal will be obligated to enforce them. When they arrive, Lin May will have been married to me for weeks. She'll have taken my name. She'll be a citizen of Montana Territory by marriage." Wang stepped closer to the fence. His voice dropped, losing its polite veneer. "You do not know what you have involved yourself in. Lin May is property purchased and paid for. Her father signed contracts. Witnesses attested. The law is absolute in this matter." "The law can be changed," Caleb said. "Not for Chinese wives," Wang replied coldly. "Not in America, not anywhere. She belongs to me. She will return to me, over my dead body." Wang's expression went flat and dangerous. "That can be arranged." Before Caleb could respond, the front door of the house opened, and Lin May stepped onto the porch. She had Emma behind her, protective, and she looked at Wang with an expression that held no fear, only cold determination. "I am not going back," she said in Cantonese, then repeated it in English. "Never." Wang's face transformed. All pretense of civility fell away, and what remained was pure possessive rage. "You are my wife," he said, switching to Cantonese. "You have humiliated me for 8 months, made me search half the continent. You will pay for that humiliation." "I already paid," Lin May replied. 9 years I paid, no more." Wang took a step toward the porch. His men moved closer, reading his intention. Caleb vaulted the fence and placed himself between Wong and the house. "You need to leave my property," Caleb said quietly. "Or what?" Wong sneered. "You will shoot me. In front of witnesses, the law will hang you." Maybe Caleb agreed, but you'll still be dead. The two men faced each other while tension built like storm pressure. Then Emma's voice cut through it all. "No." Everyone turned. Emma stood on the porch, no longer hiding behind Lin Mei. She was staring at Wong with wide, terrified eyes, and she began to shake. Caleb started toward her, but his daughter's next words stopped him cold. "The bad man." Emma said, her voice high and frightened. "The bad man who made Mama cry." Caleb felt ice flood his veins, what Emma pointed at Wong with a trembling finger. "Before Mama died, he came. He yelled at Mama, made her cry, made her sick." Wong's face flickered with something. Recognition, guilt. Then it was gone, replaced by calculated blankness. "The child is confused. I have never been to this ranch." But Dr. Harrison had appeared, drawn by the commotion, and he was staring at Wong with dawning understanding. Sarah Thorne worked in Helena before she married Caleb. She worked for a Chinese merchant family as a seamstress. "That is not uncommon," Wong said smoothly. "She witnessed something." Dr. Harrison continued, piecing it together. "She told me once near the end that she was frightened, that a man had threatened her. I thought it was delirium from the pregnancy complications." Caleb took a step toward Wong. "What did you do to my wife?" "Nothing," Wong said. "I barely knew her." "You're lying," Caleb said. And suddenly, everything made terrible sense. Sarah's stress in her final weeks, the way she had jumped at shadows, the difficult labor that had killed her. Wong had been there. Wong had threatened her. Wong had driven her into the fear that had complicated everything. Caleb lunged. "Doctor." Harrison and Hank, who had arrived with the doctor, caught him before he could reach Wong. They held him back while he strained against them, murder in his eyes. Wong stepped backward, and for the first time his composure cracked. He looked at Lin Mei, at Emma, at Caleb being restrained. Then he said something that changed everything. "You have 3 days," he told Caleb, 3 days to enjoy your pretend marriage. Then the marshal arrives with my new papers. And when he does, I will take what is mine, both the wife who betrayed me and justice for these accusations." He climbed back into his carriage and left his men following close behind. In the silence after Caleb sagged in his friend's grip, Dr. Harrison released him carefully. "We need to act fast," the doctor said. 3 days is not much time." "Time for what?" Caleb asked hopelessly. "To build a case," Dr. Harrison said. "To find proof, to give the law a reason to side with us instead of him." "There is no proof," Lin Mei said from the porch. She had Emma in her arms now, holding the crying child. "He is too careful." "Then we make proof," Hank said. "We get people to testify. We show what kind of man he is." "They will not believe Chinese testimony," Lin Mei said bitterly, "and they will not believe a child's memories." Father Murphy had arrived during the commotion, and now he spoke quietly. "Then we pray for a miracle." Caleb looked at his wife, his daughter, his friends. He looked at the ranch he had built with his own hands. He thought about everything that mattered standing on this porch, and he knew he would burn the world down before he let Wong take any of it. "We have 3 days," he said. "Then let's use them." The 3 days before the marshal's arrival passed in a blur of desperate preparation. Caleb had never considered himself a strategic man, had always trusted in hard work and quiet endurance to carry him through difficulties. But now he found himself sitting at his kitchen table, surrounded by papers and testimony, while Dr. Harrison and Father Murphy helped him build something that resembled a legal defense. Lin Mei moved through the house like a ghost, pale and silent, helping where she could, but clearly not believing any of it would matter. She had lived too long under the weight of laws that did not protect women like her, had learned too well that justice and legality were not the same thing. At night she lay beside Caleb in the bed they now shared, close, but not touching, both of them staring at the ceiling and listening to Emma's soft breathing from the small room next door. On the second night, Caleb reached across the space between them and found Lin Mei's hand in the darkness. Her fingers were cold, and he wrapped his around them, offering warmth, if nothing else. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," Caleb admitted. "What happens if we lose?" Caleb did not answer, because there was no good answer. If they lost, Lin Mei would be dragged back to San Francisco in chains if necessary. She would disappear into Wong's household, and Caleb would never see her again. The thought made his chest constrict until breathing hurt. "We won't lose," he said, though he had no evidence to support the claim. "You cannot promise that." "No," Caleb agreed, "but I can promise I'll fight. And I can promise that whatever happens, you're not alone in this." Lin May turned toward him in the darkness, and he felt more than saw the movement. She pressed her forehead against his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. They lay like that for a long time, taking comfort in simple contact, until finally exhaustion pulled them both under. The morning of the third day arrived with unseasonable cold, as if winter had decided to make one final stand before surrendering to spring. Frost covered the grass, and the cattle huddled together for warmth. Caleb stood on his porch drinking coffee and watching the road, waiting for the dust cloud that would signal the marshal's approach. "Doctor." Harrison arrived first, his medical bag in hand, and his face set with determination. "I examined Emma this morning," he said without preamble. "Documented her statement about seeing Wong threaten Sarah. It's not much, but it's something." "Will they let a 6-year-old testify?" Caleb asked. "In territorial court, maybe, if the judge is sympathetic. And if he's not, then we rely on everything else we have," which was precious little. They had Lin May's testimony about abuse, but without physical evidence, it was her word against Wong's. They had Mrs. Chen's confession, but she had disappeared and could not testify. They had Emma's fragmentary memories, but children made unreliable witnesses. They had the marriage certificate from 3 days ago, but Wong would argue it was fraudulent, entered into to escape legal obligation. Father Murphy arrived next, bringing with him a surprise. Mrs. Holloway walked beside the priest, her usually stern face softened by something that might have been sympathy. "Mrs. Holloway has something to say," Father Murphy announced. The shopkeeper looked uncomfortable but resolute. "I knew Sarah Thorne before she married you," she told Caleb. "We were friends in our way. She came to me a week before Emma was born, said she was frightened, said a man had come to the seamstress shop where she worked in Helena, had accused her of spreading lies about him. She wouldn't tell me his name, but she described him. Chinese, wealthy, middle-aged. I thought she was just having pregnancy nerves." Mrs. Holloway pulled a folded letter from her pocket. "Sarah gave me this. Told me if anything happened to her, I should keep it safe. I put it away and forgot about it until now. But after seeing that Wong fellow, after hearing Emma's testimony, I went looking." She handed the letter to Caleb. His hands shook as he unfolded the yellowed paper. Sarah's familiar handwriting swam before his eyes, and he had to blink hard to bring the words into focus. The letter was dated 2 weeks before Emma's birth. In it, Sarah described witnessing Wong beating a young Chinese woman in the back room of the merchant house where Sarah did alterations. Sarah had tried to intervene, and Wong had threatened her, told her that if she spoke of what she had seen, he would make sure she regretted it. Sarah had quit her position immediately and fled to Juniper Ridge to marry Caleb, hoping distance would keep her safe. "She never told me," Caleb said, his voice breaking. "She was protecting you," Mrs. Holloway said gently, "protecting the life you were building together." "This is evidence," Dr. Harrison said, examining the letter. "This connects Wong to Sarah's death. Maybe not directly, but it shows a pattern of intimidation and violence." Before Caleb could respond, Hank came running up the road out of breath and wild-eyed. "Marshall's coming," he gasped. "Saw the dust about 10 minutes out, and Wong's with him." Caleb folded Sarah's letter carefully and put it in his pocket. "Then we meet them in town, on our terms." The territorial courthouse was really just the community hall with a makeshift bench installed at one end. Judge Caldwell had ridden down from Helena specifically for this case, a gray-haired man with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness that leaned toward the letter of the law rather than its spirit. He sat now behind a simple wooden table reviewing documents while the room filled with spectators. Juniper Ridge had turned out in force. The benches were packed with townspeople eager to witness what many were calling the trial of the decade. Some faces showed support for Caleb and Lin May. Others revealed the harder truth that many believed a wife belonged to her husband regardless of circumstance. Wong sat at the front with his lawyer, a sharp-dressed man from San Francisco who had arrived on the same stage as the marshal. The lawyer's name was Clifton, and he carried himself with the arrogance of someone who had never lost a case he considered worth winning. Caleb sat on the opposite side with Lin May between him and Father Murphy, who had agreed to speak on their behalf since they could not afford legal representation. Emma sat on Lin May's lap, small and quiet, her eyes taking in everything with that unnerving awareness children sometimes displayed. Judge Caldwell banged his gavel, and the room fell silent. This court is convened to hear the matter of Wong Yao Ting versus Lin Mei Chen, also known as Mrs. Caleb Thorne. Mr. Clifton, you may present your case. The lawyer stood smoothly. Your Honor, the facts are simple and undisputed. Wong Yao Ting married Lin Mei Chen in San Francisco 8 years ago in a legally binding ceremony witnessed and documented according to both Chinese custom and California law. Mrs. Chen abandoned her husband 8 months ago and fled to Montana, where she assumed a false identity as a widow. He produced papers from his briefcase, spreading them on the table before the judge. Here is the marriage certificate. Here are affidavits from witnesses to the ceremony. Here is testimony from Mr. Wong's household staff confirming Mrs. Chen's residency in his home. The marriage is legal and binding. Mr. Wong simply wishes his wife returned to him. Judge Caldwell examined the documents carefully. These appear to be in order. Father Murphy, what is your response? The priest stood less polished than Clifton, but carrying moral authority the lawyer lacked. Your Honor, we do not dispute that a ceremony took place. What we dispute is whether that ceremony constituted a valid marriage given the circumstances of coercion, the bride's age and lack of understanding, and the subsequent pattern of abuse. Abuse is a serious allegation, Judge Caldwell said. Do you have evidence? Father Murphy gestured to Lin May. Mrs. Thorne has testified to 9 years of physical and emotional abuse at the hands of Mr. Wong. He calls her Mrs. Thorne. Clifton interrupted smoothly, but she married Mr. Thorne only 3 days ago, clearly in an attempt to evade her legal obligations to Mr. Wong. That marriage is fraudulent and should be dismissed. The marriage is legal, Father Murphy said firmly, performed by a priest, witnessed by upstanding members of this community, and consummated. Mrs. Thorne is a citizen of Montana Territory by virtue of that marriage, a convenient citizenship, Clifton said, entered into solely to escape lawful matrimony, or entered into because she finally found a man who did not treat her as property. Father Murphy shot back. Gentlemen, Judge Caldwell said sharply, I will hear testimony and make my determination based on evidence, not rhetoric. Mr. Clifton, call your first witness. Clifton called Wong to the stand. The merchant walked to the witness chair with measured dignity, placed his hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. He made an impressive witness, calm and articulate, presenting himself as a wronged husband, seeking only to reunite with his beloved wife. Mr. Wong Clifton began, Please describe your marriage to Lin Mei Chen. Wong's voice was steady and reasonable. Lin Mei came to me through her family. Her father owed debts, and I agreed to help by marrying his daughter. I provided her with a home security, everything a woman could want. She was educated in both Chinese and English. She had servants. She wanted for nothing, and yet she left you. Why do you think that happened? Wong shook his head sadly. I believe she was influenced by Christian missionaries who filled her head with ideas about independence and American freedom. I do not blame her. She is young and was easily misled. I simply want the opportunity to bring her home and repair our marriage. Did you ever strike her? Never, Wong said firmly. I am not a violent man. Did you restrict her movements? I protected her, Wong corrected. San Francisco can be dangerous for a Chinese woman alone. I ensured she was safe. Clifton nodded. No further questions. Father Murphy stood for cross-examination. His hands gripped the back of his chair, and Caleb could see the tension in the priest's shoulders. Mr. Wong. How old was Lin Mei when you married her? 19, Wong said. And how old were you? 40. Did Lin Mei speak English at the time of your marriage? Some Wong said. She was learning. Did she understand the marriage documents she signed? Her father explained them to her. In what language? Cantonese. And the documents were in English, were they not? Yes, but that is standard practice. Father Murphy let that sit for a moment. Mr. Wong, how many wives do you have? Wong's expression flickered. Chinese custom allows for multiple wives. That was not my question. How many? One principal wife in China, 3 in America, including Lin Mei. So Lin Mei was a concubine, not a wife in the traditional sense. She was a legal wife under American law, Wong said stiffly. A legal wife who you claim never to have struck, never to have imprisoned, never to have abused in any way. That is correct. Then why did she run? Wong's eyes went cold. You would have to ask her. I intend to, Father Murphy said. But first let me ask you about Sarah Thorne. Caleb saw Wong's face go blank. I do not know that name. She was a seamstress in Helena 4 years ago. She worked for the Chen Merchant House where you did business. I meet many people in my business dealings. Father Murphy produced Sarah's letter. This is a letter written by Sarah Thorne 2 weeks before her death. In it, she describes witnessing you beating a young Chinese woman. She describes you threatening her when she tried to intervene. Do you recall this incident? The room had gone completely silent. Every eye was fixed on Wong, watching for his reaction. The merchant's composure held, but Caleb could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. I do not recall any such incident, Wong said carefully. You do not recall threatening a pregnant woman, telling her you would make her regret interfering in your affairs. I meet many people, Wong repeated. If this woman misunderstood something she witnessed, I cannot be held responsible for her imagination. She died 2 weeks after writing this letter, Father Murphy said quietly. Complications in childbirth brought on by severe stress. Many women die in childbirth, Wong said. It is tragic but not uncommon. Father Murphy looked at Judge Caldwell. Your Honor, I believe we have established a pattern of behavior. Mr. Wong is a man who uses intimidation and violence to control the women in his life. Sarah Thorne witnessed that violence and paid for it with her life. Lin Mei Chen lived with that violence for 9 years before finding the courage to escape. This is speculation, Clifton objected. None of this has been proven. Then let us hear from Mrs. Thorne herself, Father Murphy said. Lin Mei stood slowly. She walked to the witness chair with her head high, and Caleb felt pride surge through him at her courage. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, first in English, then in Cantonese. Mrs. Thorne. Father Murphy said gently, Please tell the court about your marriage to Wong Yao Ting. Lin Mei spoke clearly, her accent present but her words precise. She described the arrangement between her father and Wong. The ceremony she did not understand. The wedding night when she learned what being a concubine meant. The 9 years that followed. She did not spare details. She spoke of being locked in rooms for days without food or water when she displeased Wong. She spoke of beatings that left bruises carefully hidden under clothing. She spoke of 2 pregnancies ended by Wong's fists because he did not want children from a concubine. She spoke of the fear that became her constant companion, the knowledge that she was property, and property had no rights. The courtroom listened in horrified silence. Several women were crying openly. Even Judge Caldwell looked disturbed. Why did you not seek help? Father Murphy asked. From whom? Lin Mei replied. The police. They do not care what happens in Chinese households. The law. The law says I am his wife and must obey. I was trapped with no way out until Mrs. Whitmore helped me escape. And now? What do you want now? I want to live, Lin Mei said simply. I want to raise Emma. I want to be free. I want to be a person instead of property. Clifton stood for cross-examination. His expression was less confident now, but he pressed forward. Mrs. Chen, or Mrs. Thorne, as you call yourself, you admit you abandoned your legal husband and assumed a false identity. I admit I escaped slavery, Lin Mei said. Marriage is not slavery. Marriage. Mine was, Lin Mei said flatly. Clifton tried several more questions, but Lin Mei met each one with calm directness. She did not waver, did not break, and Caleb watched the jury of townspeople who had gathered to witness slowly shift their expressions from judgment to sympathy. Finally, Father Murphy said, Your Honor, I have one more witness, Emma Thorne. Judge Caldwell frowned. The child is 6 years old. Are you certain this is appropriate? The child has relevant testimony, Father Murphy said. Emma walked to the witness chair holding her rag doll. She looked impossibly small in the adult-sized furniture, but when she spoke her voice was clear. "Emma," Father Murphy said gently, "do you remember the man who came to see your mother before she died?" "Yes." "Can you point him out in this room?" Emma's small finger rose and pointed directly at Wong. "Him. What did he do?" "He made Mama cry." "He yelled at her. She was scared." "Did you hear what he said?" Emma nodded. "He said she would be sorry for telling lies. He said bad things would happen." "And what happened to your mother?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "She got sick. She went to bed. She didn't wake up." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Wong stood abruptly. "The child is confused. This is nonsense." "Sit down," Mr. Wong, Judge Caldwell said sharply. But the judge's expression was troubled. He looked at Emma, at Lin May, at Caleb, at the documents spread before him. The law was clear. A wife belonged to her husband. But the spirit of the law, the idea that justice should mean more than just legal precedent, that was harder to dismiss. "I need time to consider," Judge Caldwell said. "This court is adjourned until morning. I will render my decision then." That night the ranch house held a tense vigil. No one slept. Caleb sat with Lin May on the porch while Emma dozed fitfully inside. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, and Caleb thought about justice and law and the vast distance between them. "If he rules for Wong," Lin May said quietly, "I will run again. I will not go back." "I'll come with you," Caleb said. "You cannot. Emma needs stability. The ranch." "Emma needs you," Caleb corrected, "and so do I. If you run, we run together." Lin May leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They sat like that until dawn broke cold and clear. The courtroom filled again. Judge Caldwell took his seat, and the room fell silent. The judge looked tired, as if he had not slept either. "This has been one of the most difficult decisions I have been asked to make," he began. "The law is clear that marriage is binding and that a wife's duty is to her husband. Mr. Wong has presented valid documentation of his marriage to Lin May Chen." Caleb felt his heart sink. Beside him, Lin May went very still. However, the judge continued. "The law also recognizes that contracts entered into under duress without full understanding or consent may be voided. The testimony I have heard suggests that Lin May Chen was essentially sold by her father to a man more than twice her age, that she did not understand the documents she signed, that the marriage that followed was characterized by systematic abuse and imprisonment." Furthermore, Judge Caldwell said, his voice hardening, "The testimony regarding Sarah Thorne raises serious concerns about Mr. Wong's character and behavior. While we cannot prove conclusively that his intimidation contributed to Mrs. Thorne's death, the pattern of behavior is deeply troubling." He looked directly at Wong. "Mr. Wong, your marriage to Lin May Chen is hereby declared invalid on the grounds that it was entered into without proper consent and was maintained through coercion and abuse. Lin May Chen is free." The courtroom erupted. Wong stood shouting objections. Clifton was demanding appeals, but Judge Caldwell's gavel came down hard. Furthermore, the judge said over the noise, "Evidence suggests Mr. Wong may have been involved in the death of Sarah Thorne through intimidation and threats against a pregnant woman. I am ordering him held for investigation by territorial authorities. Marshals take him into custody." The marshals moved forward. Wong struggled as they grabbed his arms, his composure finally shattering completely. "You cannot do this," he shouted. "I am a respected merchant. I have rights." "So did she," Judge Caldwell said, gesturing to Lin May. "And so did Sarah Thorne. Those rights supersede yours." As Wong was dragged from the courtroom, still protesting, Caleb turned to Lin May. She sat frozen, as if she could not quite believe what had happened. Then slowly, like ice thawing, her face transformed. The fear fell away, and what remained was pure relief. Emma climbed into her lap. "Mama," the child said. "We won. We won," Lin May repeated wonderingly. Then she turned to Caleb, and for the first time since he had known her, she smiled without reservation. "We won." The weeks that followed felt like learning to breathe after years underwater. Lin May moved through the ranch with increasing confidence, no longer looking over her shoulder, no longer flinching at sudden sounds. She planted a garden behind the house, mixing Chinese vegetables with American crops, and the hybrid result seemed to please her deeply. Emma blossomed in ways that amazed everyone. She spoke regularly now, though she was still quieter than other children. She followed Lin May everywhere, learning to cook and sew and garden. Dr. Harrison said the child was making remarkable progress, that having a mother figure had unlocked something in her that Caleb alone could not reach. One evening in early summer, Caleb stood at the fence watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and red. Lin May came to stand beside him, fitting herself under his arm with the easy comfort of long practice. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I'm grateful," Caleb said, "that I don't know what I did to deserve this." "You chose to help when you had no reason to," Lin May said. "You stood against a powerful man because it was right. You gave me a home. You gave me one too," Caleb said. "I was just surviving before. Now I'm living." They stood in companionable silence, watching the light fade. From inside the house came the sound of Emma singing some melody Lin May had taught her that mixed English and Cantonese in a way that belonged to neither culture and both. "I want to tell you something," Lin May said, "about Emma calling me Mama at the dance." Caleb waited, giving her space to find the words. "When she said it, I thought she meant me," Lin May explained. "But she was looking past me, at Mrs. Chen. I think part of Emma recognized something familiar. The fear. The way I held myself like someone who had been hit too many times. You think Emma saw her mother in you? I think Emma saw what Sarah might have become if Wong had succeeded in breaking her," Lin May said. "And when Emma saw me, she saw a chance to save the mother she lost by saving me." The insight made Caleb's throat tight. He pulled Lin May closer. "She saved us both then." "We saved each other," Lin May corrected. "You, me, Emma. We are a family because we chose to be." That night, after Emma was asleep, Caleb and Lin May lay in bed together. Real darkness had fallen, and through the open window came the sound of crickets and the distant call of an owl hunting. Lin May turned to face him. "I need to tell you something." Caleb tensed. "What, I am pregnant." The words hung in the darkness. Caleb felt his breath stop, his mind going blank with shock. Then joy flooded through him, so intense it was almost painful. "Are you sure Dr. Harrison confirmed it this morning? I am perhaps 6 weeks along." Caleb reached out and placed his hand gently on her stomach. There was no sign yet, but knowing life grew, there transformed everything. "How do you feel?" terrified Lin May admitted, "but also happy. This child will be born free, born into love. That is something I never had. We'll protect this one," Caleb promised, "all of us, together." "I know," Lin May said. "That is why I am not so terrified as I thought I would be." They lay in silence for a while, hands entwined, contemplating the future expanding before them. Then Lin May spoke again. "There is one more thing," she said. "I want to find Mrs. Whitmore, the missionary who helped me escape. I want to thank her, and I want to help other women the way she helped me." "How, I do not know yet," Lin May said, "but there are other women like me, other wives trapped in situations they cannot escape. If we could help them find safety, find new lives, it would mean something." "We'll figure it out," Caleb said, "whatever you need." The next morning they told Emma about the baby. The child's face lit up with an excitement Caleb had never seen. "A brother or sister?" she asked. "We don't know yet," Lin May said. "But yes, you will be a big sister." Emma threw her arms around Lin May's waist. "I will be a good big sister," she promised. "I will teach them everything." 1 year later, Juniper Ridge held its spring dance again. This time, when Caleb, Lin May, and Emma arrived, Lin May carried an infant son in her arms. They had named him Samuel after no one in particular because this child belonged only to the future. The town had changed its opinion of Lin May over the months. She was no longer the mysterious widow, no longer the source of scandalous gossip. She was Mrs. Thorne, respected member of the community, the rancher's wife, who had started a small fund to help women in difficult situations. Mrs. Holloway had become her unlikely ally in this work, and between them, they had already helped 3 women find safe passage away from dangerous circumstances. Caleb led Lin May onto the dance floor, and they moved together slowly, carefully. Emma dancing with Dr. Harrison nearby, and Samuel sleeping peacefully in a basket watched by Father Murphy. "Do you ever regret it?" Lin May asked quietly as they swayed to the fiddle music. "The joke proposal that became real?" "Every day," Caleb said. Lin May's face fell. He caught the hurt in her expression and quickly corrected himself. "I regret that I didn't mean it from the start," he said. "I regret all the time we could have had if I'd been braver sooner." Lin May's expression softened into a smile. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "We have time now," she said. "All the time we need." "All the time we need," Caleb agreed. The music played on, and they danced, surrounded by community, by family, by the life they had built from desperation and courage. Emma twirled nearby, her laughter bright and free. Samuel slept on, innocent and safe. And overhead the Montana sky stretched vast and infinite, holding space for all their tomorrows. The wind still moved across the high pastures, still asked no permission. But now Caleb had learned that some things were worth asking for, worth fighting for, worth believing in even when belief seemed foolish. He had learned that home was not just a place you built with your hands, but a shelter you created with your heart. That family was not just blood, but choice. That love required courage more than certainty. He held his wife closer and felt her breath warm against his neck. From across the room, Emma caught his eye and waved her smile as bright as morning sun. Samuel stirred in his basket but did not wake. This was peace. Not the empty quiet of loneliness, but the full warm silence of contentment. This was what he had been looking for without knowing it, what they had all been looking for, and they had found it together.